Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be doing an overview of Shakespeare's Othello. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of insight into the characters, the plotline and the themes involved. So firstly, in terms of our characters, we have Othello, who's our protagonist. He is also the tragic hero in this play. He is married to Desdemona and he is the Duke's sort of go-to in terms of military general. He is an important general. He is very successful in battle. We then have Iago, and Iago is the antagonist, the villain in the play, and he is going to attempt to get revenge on Othello. He is a very cunning character, but a very clever character, and he's going to manipulate Othello into ultimately, causing his demise. Rodrigo is Iago's sort of stupid, silly sidekick. He doesn't understand that Iago is manipulating him. Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona, who obviously Othello has married, and so he's going to land up giving all of his wealth away to Iago because Iago has promised to somehow make sure that Desdemona will fall in love with him. He is ultimately betrayed by Iago at the end of the play. Desdemona is Othello's wife. She is Brabantio, there are different versions of this name, daughter. She is a Venetian woman, a young Venetian woman. She's seen to be very beautiful, and she is accused of cheating on Othello. She is quite an innocent, naive character, and she obviously did not cheat on Othello, but Othello does not believe her when she says that she has not. Brabantio, that's Desdemona's father. He is a senator, so he's quite high up in the Venetian sort of governmental system. He is extremely racist with regard to Othello and Desdemona's relationship. He's quite important in Act 1, but then he's not so important later on. Then we have the Duke, also just important in Act 1 in setting things in motion, because Act 1 takes place in Venice and the rest of the play takes place in Cyprus. So the reason why they go to Cyprus is because the Duke has ordered Othello to go and defend Cyprus against the Turks. Cassio is Othello's lieutenant, so right at the beginning of the play, Othello promotes Cassio over Iago to the position of lieutenant, and this causes Iago to, become jealous and put his plan in motion to destroy Othello. Emilia is Iago's wife. We only really meet her in Act 2. She is also Desdemona's attendant. She's quite important in terms of inadvertently assisting Iago in his plot to make Othello think that Desdemona is cheating on him, but she also ultimately reveals the truth, which causes Othello to kill himself out of, sheer desperation and remorse. So let's have a look at the plot. So this is a very, very condensed summary. Cassio is promoted by Othello to the position of lieutenant. Iago becomes jealous and wants to take revenge on Othello. Othello and Desdemona's secret marriage is revealed to Desdemona's father by Iago and Rodrigo. Othello is sent to fight off the Turks in Cyprus. Iago then manipulates Othello into believing that Desdemona is having an affair. Emilia steals Desdemona's handkerchief, which serves as proof to Desdemona's betrayal, because it is planted in Cassio's possessions. Othello becomes extremely jealous and kills Desdemona, and then ultimately in the last scene, Othello kills himself upon finding out the truth. So that's just a very, very short recount of what happens. So here are some major themes that come into play within this story. So appearance versus reality. We see this with regard to many of the different characters. How they appear, how they seem is very different to their reality. And the most important one is Iago, because he appears to be on Othello's side. He appears to be a trusted advisor, a trusted friend even. And yet in reality he is plotting Othello's demise. And it's not just with regard to Othello that he serves to illustrate this theme, but actually is in his interactions with everyone, with Rodrigo, with Desdemona, with Emilia. Friendship and loyalty, this is quite significant as well, because Othello believes that Iago is honest. He believes that he is his friend, whereas to Iago friendship is expendable. Love, this is a key theme here because the entire plot has got to do with this loving relationship between Othello and Desdemona. In Act 1, we hear about how they fell in love, and the question is, are they actually truly in love? Is this relationship ever going to last due to the foundation on which it's set? And that's a question to consider when they describe how they fell in love with each other. But also this love proves to, ultimately be betrayed. And Iago manipulates this love and turns it into I don't know if you could call it hatred, because Othello still apparently loves Desdemona, but ultimately it leads to both of their deaths, to Othello and Desdemona's deaths. So this theme of love is important. Jealousy is extremely important. Obviously the whole plot is set in motion by Iago's jealousy of Othello, of Cassio, but also he manipulates Othello to become jealous of Desdemona, which causes Othello's downfall. Passion versus reason. This is an important one, and for me, you can argue many different perspectives on this. Are these characters acting out of passion or reason? Do they change over time? So for me, at some points Iago is acting out of passion, some points he's acting out of reason. Othello, he starts off acting out as reasonable and rational, yet he turns into this passionate person who doesn't listen to rational thought and logic. So that's an important theme to grapple with. Reputation and honor. This is incredibly significant with regard to many of the characters. Once again, Cassio has a famous quote where he is absolutely horrified that he's lost his reputation. Iago manipulates the situation and Cassio loses his reputation, and he's absolutely devastated by this. Iago's reputation is arguably, the cause for so much of the drama and the tragedy, and it seemed to be false, right? Because his reputation is this honest, friendly, dependable man, and yet he's the opposite of that. And Othello's ultimate urge to kill Desdemona comes from protecting his own reputation and his own honor, and he can't believe that his own wife would just disregard his honor, his reputation, but also her own by cheating on him. Racial prejudice. Being an outsider, Othello is subjected to racial prejudice in a very alarming way, especially in Act 1 when we have Brabantio's confrontation with Othello, because he's very angry that he has married his daughter, that Othello has married his daughter. Betrayal and trust. This links to that love, friendship and loyalty, and even appearance versus reality, because it appears that Desdemona has betrayed Othello's trust, but in reality she hasn't, and Othello to an extent betrays her. And then in all Shakespeare's plays we have the theme of fate versus free will. So what happens to a person, or what happens in a storyline, is it because of the character's free will? Have their actions caused this, or is it fate? Was it always destined to be? I hope that video was helpful, and I'll be posting some more detailed videos on Othello in the future. Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. Today we're going to be talking about Shakespeare's Othello, and specifically we're going to be talking about Act 1. We're going to go through a scene-by-scene plot analysis as well as a themes analysis for this act. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel so that you can follow along for Act 2, which is coming soon. So Act 1, Scene 1 is set in Venice. Rodrigo and Iago are immersed in a conversation. That's how we start off the scene. Rodrigo is upset as Desdemona is now married, even though he has been paying Iago to secure Desdemona for Rodrigo. So Rodrigo is, this sort of stupid character who, well, he's not incredibly intelligent in the sense that he trusts Iago and he really believes that Iago is going to secure Desdemona for him and make Desdemona fall in love with him. I suppose we can't call him too stupid because Othello falls for Iago's manipulations as well, and Iago is merely using Rodrigo's money. Iago is angry though at this stage because he has just found out that Othello has promoted Cassio to the position of lieutenant instead of him. Now, Iago's motivations are going to continue to grow and change throughout the play, so just pay close attention to this, because in every soliloquy that he has, remember a soliloquy is a moment where the character's on stage by him or herself, and we really get an insight as the audience into their thoughts and their feelings, their true thoughts and feelings. And that's quite important for Iago, because he doesn't actually reveal his true intentions to any of the characters. He's manipulating everyone at the same time with different narratives and different stories. So pay attention to his soliloquies, and in his soliloquies he's going to keep changing his mind as to why he's doing something. He's a bit of an opportunistic villain. So at this stage it's because of the promotion, later on it's because he thinks that Othello's been sleeping with his wife, later on it's something else. Iago reassures Rodrigo that he hates Othello. And they discuss how Othello the Moor, sorry there's a spelling error there should be an E for the, has eloped with Desdemona. So Desdemona is this young Venetian woman, and Brabantio is her father, and he is a senator, so he's a very important man in Venetian society. And there's been this secret marriage, and so they discuss this, and they decide they're going to go wake up Brabantio and sabotage Othello's marriage, because Brabantio is going to be angry about the marriage. They speak of Othello using racial slurs, and Brabantio comes out of his house fuming, and he goes on a search to confront Othello. Iago quickly leaves the scene to pretend to be on Othello's side. Moving on to scene 2, Iago goes to Othello and pretends to be caring towards him by warning Othello of Brabantio's anger. So he's just caused this whole big situation by revealing to Brabantio that Desdemona and Othello have eloped, and then he comes to Othello and he tries to act like the cool guy and say, no, I'm just warning you, Brabantio's coming, and he's very angry. Othello is not too worried about this. He is convinced that his honorable reputation and his royal roots will hold him in good stead when confronted with Brabantio. But we're going to see that Brabantio does not care about this at all. He is blinded by racism and anger. Brabantio violently confronts Othello and accuses Othello of using dark magic to bewitch Desdemona into marrying him. At the same time, Othello refuses actually to fight physically with Brabantio, as Brabantio seems to want to do. And he rather says, let's talk. And he also says, well, the Duke has called for me, so do you really want to fight with me now? So notice how Othello acts in this scene, and contrast it to later acts and later scenes when he acts more driven by passion instead of reason. Act 3. So this is where the Duke is now telling Othello what he needs him to do. He tells Othello that a Turkish fleet is threatening Cyprus. The Duke supports Brabantio's anger at first, because Brabantio is a senator and he's very important, so as he walks in angry, the Duke is like, do whatever you need to whoever has offended you in any way. But then he quickly changes his mind when he realizes that Brabantio is angry at Othello because Venice desperately needs Othello's military skills in this battle. Othello makes his defense for marrying Desdemona, and he asks for Desdemona to be brought before her father and the Duke to corroborate the tale of how they fell in love. So he goes on this whole story about how he and Desdemona fell in love, and this is quite important, I think, that he asks for Desdemona to be brought, because it shows that he is reasonable, that he respects Desdemona as well. He's asked for her to come and tell her version of the story. Like, don't just believe me, believe Desdemona as well. And Brabantio is forced to accept the marriage. Importantly, to do with their theme of love, the reasons they give each other for how they fell in love was that Othello had told Desdemona all of these crazy stories of his history, of his past, of his background, of what he's been through. And also the reason why Othello was even in contact with Desdemona was because Brabantio keeps on inviting Othello to his house because he's fascinated by all his stories. However, he clearly does not want him to marry Desdemona though. So there's a bit of a double standard over there. But the reason Othello says that he fell in love with Desdemona was Desdemona fell in love with Othello because of hearing all these stories. She was fascinated by all these stories, and Othello fell in love with Desdemona because she pitied him for all of the trauma that he's been through. And that's an important thing to note, because later on this relationship is going to obviously fall apart very dramatically and very tragically. So was this basis of this relationship strong from the get-go, or was it always going to be susceptible to some sense of destruction? Moving on, Desdemona requests to accompany Othello to Cyprus, and the Duke agrees. Othello trusts Iago to accompany Desdemona to Cyprus. So Iago is an ancient or an ensign in the army. He is close to Othello. He is Othello's friend, and here we see the amount of trust that Othello has in Iago, because he will ask him to accompany his newlywed wife to Cyprus. Iago has the speech about a garden, and this is an important speech because it shows the audience an important aspect of his character. Apologies for the full stop in the middle there. He says, "Our bodies are our gardens, to which our wills are gardeners, but we have reason to cool our raging." And this is significant in terms of the theme of passion versus reason. So for Iago, he is very cunning, he is very manipulative, he is very critical and very analytical. So for him, he's saying that we have control over our actions, so we shouldn't be governed by passion. He says we have reason to cool our raging. So when we get too passionate, or we get too jealous, or we get too caught up in something, human beings have this sense of reason which we can tap into, and that reason will cool our raging. And so this is significant because on one hand, Iago can be seen as a very passionate person in the sense that he's driven by jealousy, but at the same time, from this we can see that he's very he implements reason in his decision making. He is very rational. Whereas Othello later on is going to be driven by passion, he's going to be driven by jealousy instead of thinking logically, and so he doesn't implement this reason to cool our raging. But I think this also shows Iago's cunningness and his methodology in terms of how he's going to manipulate the situation around him, so that Othello thinks that he's being logical, but he's actually not. Iago convinces Rodrigo to pay him more money to secure Desdemona for him, and this is going to lead to, quite an interesting storyline between Iago and Rodrigo, where Rodrigo is eventually going to literally pay Iago all of his money, and he sells all of his land for Iago, even though he has not seen any progress in terms of Iago's promise of securing Desdemona for him. Iago makes plans to defeat Othello. He adds another motivation here. There are apparently rumors that Othello had an affair with his wife Emilia. Iago's speech at the end is important. It's a soliloquy, so we've already mentioned what a soliloquy is, so look out for all of those long soliloquies that happen, because remember, Iago is never truthful to actually any of the characters. He has a different narrative that he shares with each of them, so make sure that you read those soliloquies carefully to understand what is actually going on in his head, what are his plans, what are his motivations, what is he ultimately trying to achieve. And so lastly, let's chat about some themes. These are, for me, the main themes that come up in every single act, or most acts in Othello. And the themes are really important to discuss because these are usually your basis. They usually form a basis for your essay topics that you might get in an exam. So appearance versus reality, and we're talking specifically about Act 1 over here. Obviously, we have Iago with appearance versus reality. He appears to be loyal to Othello. He appears to be a friend to Othello, but in reality, he is plotting his demise. Brabantio also appears to like Othello by inviting him to dinner, but he's extremely racist, and in reality, he's racist, and he doesn't want him to marry Desdemona. Friendship and loyalty, we've sort of discussed that already in terms of appearance versus reality. Love, we discussed that in quite a bit of detail earlier. The love between Othello and Desdemona obviously is now we're seeing, the foundational points, we're seeing how it develops, and later on we're going to see how it transforms into absolute disaster. Jealousy, well, we see here that Iago is jealous of Cassio, he's jealous of Othello, and through that jealousy the plot will unfold. Rodrigo is also jealous of Othello because he is married to Desdemona. Passion versus reason, we discussed that quite a bit in the earlier slides, so I won't spend too much time on that. Reputation and honor, this is something that Othello believes is going to make Brabantio happy about him and Desdemona's marriage. The fact that he has a very strong reputation, he is a very, very reputable and honorable man, and an honorable military general. racial prejudice. Brabantio uses many racial slurs, as do Iago and Rodrigo, to undermine and to criticize and to act abhorrently towards Othello. Betrayal and trust. Well, here we have, remember, Othello trusts Iago so much that he's going to let him be responsible for getting Desdemona to Cyprus. We're going to see how that develops. And then fate versus free will. For me, free will usually reigns supreme in Shakespearean plays. That's just my opinion. But here we see that Iago is plotting Othello's demise. And we see he doesn't have a full plan yet, but he's working on creating this plan in Act 1. And so that to me seems to be free will, because he's actually making the conscious decisions. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that has been helpful. Please like and subscribe. Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be unpacking Act 2 of William Shakespeare's Othello. Act 2, Scene 1. So from this act to the end of the play, we are situated in Cyprus, and this is a marked difference from Act 1, which was set in Venice. Venice is representative of order. We have the Duke there, we have senators, we have people in charge, we have a certain way that things must transpire, certain processes, whereas in Cyprus there is more freedom. And so this is going to be significant because this is when Iago's plan can come to fruition, and Iago can set about manipulating Othello and manipulating the other characters because there isn't that sense of Venetian order. The war with the Turks is called off as the Turkish fleet succumbs to the storm. So there's a big tempest, there's a big storm, the Turkish fleet is unable to even make it to Cyprus, and so there is no war. So this is quite a big deal, because we have the war being introduced in like the previous scene, Act 3, Scene 1, and by Act 2, Scene 1, no, there's no more war. And obviously this is going to give space to Iago's plan, because now there's no actually war for them to fight. There's nothing to, almost in inverted commas, distract them. Now they're going to be dealing with their personal issues, and Iago's plan is going to go off without a hitch. Cassio arrives first. Remember, Cassio is Othello's lieutenant. He was separated from Othello at sea due to the storm. The next ship that comes is Iago, Emilia, and Desdemona. So remember, Iago was given the responsibility of bringing Desdemona. Emilia is Iago's wife, but she is also Desdemona's attendant. And as they arrive, there's this conversation between the three of them, and we hear Iago say many, many sexist things about women. He talks about them being wildcats in their kitchen, this idea that women have this problem with appearance versus reality, that they appear to be these innocent people, but behind closed doors, they're actually not so innocent. And during this exchange, we see Desdemona defends Emilia from Iago's taunts. And I think that's significant because Emilia doesn't say much in this scene, but later on she's going to be a key figure who goes against Iago and ultimately reveals the truth to defend Desdemona's honor. Othello finally arrives, and he and Desdemona make a show of their happiness to be with each other. They proclaim their delight and their love and their happiness, and all is very well. And now we're going to have Iago seeing this, and he is going to put his plan into action. So what he does is he instructs Rodrigo to pick a fight with Cassio to compromise Cassio's honor. And then we have a soliloquy where it is revealed to the audience why he is doing this and what he wants to do. So remember, we said we need to watch the development of how his motivations develop, and how his plan ultimately develops. So he informs the audience that he's suspicious of both Cassio and Othello of sleeping with Emilia. He plans to manipulate Rodrigo into helping him execute his plan. Iago claims he wants to get Othello's praise as well as get revenge on him. Iago's plan is not entirely specific yet, but he's figuring it out. So here we don't just have he's not just going to try and manipulate Othello, he's going to get Cassio involved, and he's going to get Rodrigo involved. Act 2, Scene 2 is really, really short. A herald basically just announces the end of the war, so that's a key plot point. There is no war. We're going to be focusing on sort of the domestic lives of these main characters. Act 2, Scene 3, very big scene. We have the action really starting in this scene. So Cassio and Iago are speaking, and they are discussing Desdemona's beauty and attractiveness, and they really discuss this at length, which is quite sort of strange. Iago entices Cassio to drink, despite Cassio's protest that he prefers not to drink as he reacts badly to alcohol. So he tries to resist Iago's offer of some alcoholic beverage, and Iago insists that he drinks. Iago has another soliloquy where he sets out his planned development, which includes the step of making Cassio drunk and provoking him to do something offensive in front of a group of people. And this is significant because this is going to deprive Cassio of his reputation, which is going to lead to Iago's next step of the plan. Iago speaks with Montano about the virtue of Cassio and tells him of Cassio's drinking problem. This shows the complexity of the web of lies Iago is constructing and elucidates the theme of appearance versus reality. So Montano is the governor of Cyprus, and Iago, this point really just solidifies the complexity of the theme of appearance versus reality, because Iago speaks to Montano and he says, Cassio is such a great guy, what a wonderful person, but you know what, he has this drinking problem. So he's making up the story about Cassio's drinking problem, which theoretically, if we think about it, isn't maybe needed. It's sort of it's showing us the extra mile Iago is willing to go. And so here we see the reason why, for me, it elucidates the appearance versus reality is it shows that Iago is not being truthful to any character. So even in his interaction with Montano, he's spewing a specific story. So even though when he's lying about a story, he makes up a different story for every single character that he interacts with. And so here he tells Montano that Cassio has a drinking problem to further undermine Cassio and to really degrade his reputation. Rodrigo provokes the drunk Cassio and Iago's orders, and Cassio drunkenly fights with Rodrigo and then Montano. Because Montano gets involved, he's like, oh, this guy, he has a drinking problem because what Iago has told him. Rodrigo acts blindly here. He just does what Iago says. And Iago, once Cassio is fighting with Montano, Iago orders Rodrigo to go cry mutiny. So that's a quote from the text. Basically, go and, wake up everyone, go tell everyone there's been this fight, there's been this mutiny. And this is all part of Iago's plan to make sure that Cassio's reputation and honor is diminished. Othello arrives and believes Iago's falsified version of events. He trusts Iago to the highest degree. He doesn't ask any questions. Iago tells the story, and Othello listens to him blindly. And when you're reading the story of what Iago says, when you're reading this account, just notice how manipulative and how smart he is, the way he does it. He says, I'd rather have my tongue cut out than speak badly about Cassio. And he really, really paints this picture of being this really trustworthy, honorable man who just wants to tell Othello the truth. So he's really, really clever. And you can see the power of rhetoric as well, the way he's able to use his language to convince Othello of what Cassio's done, which is bad, but also he's going to be so powerful with this language in that he's going to also convince Cassio that he's still his friend. Even though he has just betrayed him, Cassio is going to believe that Iago wants the best for him, which is quite a skill to have. Cassio is demoted and he's devastated at the loss of his reputation. So he is absolutely mortified. He feels like the fact that his reputation has been taken away from him and his job title, that he is, nothing. He has lost an integral aspect of himself. And there's a very good quote for that as well, which I think I put on the very first slide. He says it's like, it's an immortal part of him, and he feels bestial now that he doesn't have his reputation. So this theme of reputation and honor is incredibly significant because he feels like his reputation and honor is what makes him a human being. And so losing this reputation is really devastating. Iago pretends to be Cassio's friend and advises him to petition his case to be restored to his position of honor to Desdemona, as she has remarkable influence over Othello. So Iago says to Cassio, you know what? Desdemona has so much influence over Othello now, Othello's very angry with you, so don't go talk to him. But as a friend, this is what I would do. I would go and talk to Desdemona, and Desdemona will then talk to Othello about you and convince him that you should be reinstated. And Cassio is completely on board with this plan. He thanks Iago. He says, that's a brilliant idea. And then Iago explains to the audience what he's doing here. He says when Desdemona attempts to persuade Othello to forgive Cassio, he will make Othello believe that she's doing this because of her love of Cassio. So he plans that Cassio is going to speak to Desdemona, ask her to petition him. Desdemona, being the sweet person that she is, will go and speak to Othello and ask that he reinstates Cassio, and Iago will show or manipulate Othello into thinking the reason why she's asking this is because she loves Cassio and that they're having an affair. Rodrigo wants to give up and return to Venice as he feels that securing Desdemona is a lost cause. He doesn't see any progress, but Iago tells him to be patient, and he goes on a bit of a rant about being patient, and Rodrigo's like, okay, fine, I'll be patient, I'll wait a little bit longer. Iago explains to the audience that he will manipulate the situations, that Othello will see Cassio and Desdemona together and become incredibly and irrationally jealous. So on top of Desdemona now telling Othello to reinstate, or trying to convince Othello to reinstate Cassio, he's going to show Cassio and Desdemona together, and that's going to be sort of this one level of proof, in inverted commas, that Desdemona is having an affair. Iago hurries to set his plan in motion. He's like, let's get straight to it. Alright, so our themes, and as we mentioned in our Act 1 video, the themes are very important because they are usually used as the foundational element of potential essay topics. So in this act, appearance versus reality, we clearly have Iago in this position here, and we have it in terms of his interactions with Othello, with Rodrigo, and with Cassio. Friendship and loyalty, also really significant and very much linked to appearance versus reality. Othello, undoubtedly and unquestionably believes Iago's tale of events because he believes that he's loyal to him and that he's a friend. Cassio also believes that Iago is his friend, and that is what is going to lead to such terrible things. And also ultimately Othello is going to feel extremely betrayed by Cassio when he's convinced that Cassio is sleeping with Desdemona, and that's going to lead to the breakup of this friendship. We also see that loyalty for Othello, when he sees that Cassio has done something so horrendous and he's been fighting in a drunken way, he feels like he's lost, that Cassio is maybe not loyal to him and his cause and what he stands for. And so therefore he's very strict and harsh in the way that he punishes Cassio. Love, I suppose the love comes in scene 1, but maybe not in scene 3 in the big chunk of Act 2, but we see Desdemona and Othello's love for each other. Jealousy, well, Iago is just driven by jealousy at this point, and his plan is ultimately to make Othello jealous. Passion versus reason, this is really important. In Othello's reaction to Iago's tale about how Cassio drank and how he provoked this fight, I want you to consider whether his reaction was driven by passion, like anger, or if it was driven by reason and rationality. I would say to an extent there is that element of passion there, because he listens to Iago's story. He doesn't ask for Cassio to say anything or to corroborate the story or what actually happened. He listens to what Iago says, and he's very angry. When no one's talking to him, when no one's telling him what happened, he keeps pressing them. And so I think that his reaction is driven by passion in this instance, which is significant because it sort of starts this downward spiral of Othello, the fact that he's feeding into what Iago wants him to do. Reputation and honor, significant with Cassio. Remember, he is horrified that he's lost this integral aspect of himself, but also with Othello, because his reaction to Cassio's betrayal is also deemed to be, related to his reputation and his own honor, because if he's not seen to have punished Cassio for these actions, he's seen to have associated himself with them, which would have ultimately diminished his reputation and honor. So the fact that he acts so viciously or very harshly, and he makes this harsh decree to Cassio, is an act of preservation regarding his reputation and honor. Also, Iago's reputation and honor, because his reputation and his honor is believed Yeah, it is seen to be, it appears to be the one that should be listened to. And you'll notice throughout the play, everyone calls him Honest Iago, Honest Iago. His reputation precedes him, and he's actually the one who admits that reputation may be false, because his reputation is ultimately false. But for Cassio and Othello, reputation and honor is such a key aspect of their lives, and this was important in Shakespearean times. It was important, in these old Venetian times as well. Racial prejudice, there's always this underlying racial prejudice when these characters are interacting with Othello, especially when, like for Iago and Rodrigo, when they're acting in a they're trying to resist Othello and they hate him. There's always that undercurrent, but the predominant evidence for racial prejudice can be seen in Act 1. Betrayal and trust, so we discussed that. Cassio has almost betrayed Othello's, sort of doctrine of honor. And Iago betrays everyone ultimately, even though they trust him a great deal. And then fate versus free will. So here, once again, for me, free will usually reigns supreme. But we do see elements of destiny and fate here, because if Othello is going to act that way regarding Cassio, we can see how he might be led to believe, or how he might be led to act in a certain way, in a violent way, like he will, or in a passion-driven way, like he will when he encounters Desdemona's supposed affair. But also in terms of free will, because Iago is acting, right? Nothing's just happening because of destiny. He is acting, and those actions are leading to further actions, which is ultimately going to lead to the tragedy. I hope that video has been helpful. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you back here for Act 3. Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be continuing our discussion of Othello, specifically looking at Act 3 today. And as you can see on the screen, we have one of the most famous quotes from this play that Iago says to Othello in this act, warning him, or warning in inverted commas more like, about the dangers of jealousy. He says, "O beware, my lord, of jealousy, it is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on." So let's get into a scene-by-scene analysis, and then we'll talk about our themes in this act. So Act 3, Scene 1, we have a bit of a comedic interlude, which is very much appreciated in this very tragic play. And it's comes about as Cassio is asking to speak with Emilia. Remember, Emilia is Desdemona's attendant, so he's trying to speak with Emilia to arrange to speak with Desdemona, because he's going to follow Iago's advice. He wants to plead with Desdemona to speak with Othello on his behalf. Act 3, Scene 2 is not very important. Othello is just sending some letters in the scene. So let's move on to Scene 3. So in Scene 3, the Act 3, Scene 3 is a very important scene. We see a lot of the different themes come into play in this scene. So Desdemona assures Cassio that she will petition Othello for Cassio's reinstatement, and we see Desdemona is very sweet, she's very sort of moral, she's very loyal, and she says to Cassio, "No, don't worry, I totally understand. I'm going to definitely ask Othello to reconsider this punishment that he's given you. You are a loyal person." And so obviously she doesn't realize it now, but she's digging herself into a very bad situation. Iago is then talking to Othello, and he draws his attention to the fact that Cassio and Desdemona are conversing alone, which obviously was his plan all along. And as they're walking by, he's like, "Oh look, Cassio and Desdemona are sitting together." Iago deftly and subtly manipulates Othello into questioning Desdemona's faithfulness. And if you read this part, if you're going to read any part of the play in a lot of detail, I would highly suggest this particular scene, because the way Iago manipulates Othello is so masterful. He doesn't actually say anything, he just says something between the lines, and then he gets Othello to say the actual thing for him. It's absolutely remarkable. It's sort of this masterclass in manipulation, in the power of rhetoric as well. Othello and Iago discuss that appearance should equate to reality, yet it is not so. So there's a lot of, as I said, the discussion of themes here, and not just the themes coming into play, but Iago and Othello literally discuss so many different themes in an overt way. They are literally discussing appearance versus reality, and Othello is sort of wistfully wishing that appearance equated to reality, which we obviously know it does not. It is quite ironic that he is speaking about this very theme to Iago, who epitomizes the sort of segregation of appearance and reality. Iago warns Othello of the dangers of jealousy, so that's where we had our quote that we discussed right at the beginning of the video. Othello is torn by Iago's words regarding Desdemona, and so I've got a typo there with Iago's name, so please ignore that. But it's really important to note that in this scene we have Othello at the start of the scene. He is still very much believes that Desdemona is faithful to him. Iago sort of manipulates him and he starts thinking about this, and at this point though, even in we're like the middle of the scene, he's still like, you know, I get what you're saying, but Desdemona is 100% faithful. By the end of the scene, we're going to see he's completely switched sides. So he's completely gone the opposite route. I don't know if we would say like a 180-degree shift. He has completely changed his mind. There's a theme of destiny and fate, and we spoke about that in previous videos. And I've spoken a lot about how, you know, perhaps for me, there's a lot of free will, because I think that characters choose their own fates or choose their own destinies. But here we have this theme of destiny and fate, because Iago has expressed doubt in Desdemona, and we're going to see that the ending of the play is now predetermined, because Othello is not going to be able to get this image out of his head. He's not going to be able to ever believe another tale that's going to be told, and we're going to see that different people tell him the tale that Desdemona is innocent, but he's not going to believe them. So once this seed of doubt has been rooted in his head, the ending of the play with this tragedy is almost predetermined, and that's why we have that theme of fate and destiny. Desdemona mistakenly drops the handkerchief which Othello gave her as a gift, and this is obviously significant because Emilia sees the handkerchief and she gives it to Iago, because her husband Iago has been asking for this handkerchief. He's actually asked her to steal it, and she didn't want to steal it, but Desdemona dropped it, so she picked it up, she gave it to Iago. She doesn't know what he's going to do with it. Iago plants the handkerchief in Cassio's belongings. Iago knows that he has successfully poisoned Othello's ear, and there's a wonderful quote, I don't know if it's in the scene exactly, but just this image of like, it probably is somewhere in the scene, but pouring pestilence into his ear. So he has poisoned Othello's ear, he has fed him lies, and now Othello is not going to be able to get away from that. Iago recognizes that this misplaced handkerchief will serve as enough proof to convince the jealous Othello that Desdemona is cheating on him. So because Iago knows that he has manipulated Othello so powerfully, he understands that he doesn't actually need much proof in order to make Othello act on these doubts and these assumptions. And so he knows that this handkerchief, just by placing it with Cassio, is going to serve as enough proof to convince Othello to, you know, kill Desdemona, and, you know, this is how he's going to get his revenge. Othello transforms into a jealous, aggressive, and passion-driven person who demands Cassio and Desdemona's brutal death. So here we have that complete shift. He completely changes from being this very reasonable, rational, honorable man to being jealous, aggressive, and passion-driven. Iago still epitomizes the theme of appearance versus reality as he vows to obey Othello's demands. And just notice how strong Iago's manipulation is. He's able to turn Othello in a single scene. So as we were speaking about earlier. And then we're going to move on to scene 4, where this is going to be heightened, because now Othello and Iago have been talking, and now we're going to see Othello interact with Desdemona now that he thinks that she is cheating on him. So Act 3, Scene 4. Desdemona naively continues her attempts to convince Othello of Cassio's loyalty and to reinstate him. So she keeps asking Othello to reconsider Cassio's punishment, and obviously we know that she is digging herself into a grave at this point, because he is interpreting this as, oh, she's having an affair with Cassio, and that's why she wants to help him. Desdemona is distraught that she has lost the handkerchief, and Othello then demands to see the handkerchief. But Desdemona panics because Othello's tone is extremely harsh, and she lies and she says that she hasn't lost the handkerchief, she just doesn't have it with her. Iago and Desdemona remark how out of character it is for Othello to be so angry and jealous, and there we can see the effect of the manipulation. And Cassio asks Bianca, who is a prostitute that he has been sleeping with, to copy the embroidery pattern on the handkerchief he found in his belongings. So, important note about Bianca is she sort of is in love with Cassio, but Cassio does not care for her at all. And this is going to be important in Act 4 because of how Iago manipulates this relationship between Cassio and Bianca. But in this scene, we understand, the audience understands that Cassio does have the handkerchief in his possession. Note that he does not know it is Desdemona's handkerchief, because obviously there is absolutely nothing going on between Cassio and Desdemona. And he asks Bianca to copy the embroidery pattern, this sort of like innocent request, because he likes the pattern. And this is going to lead us very nicely into Act 4, as I said. Alright, so some themes. These are the same themes that come up every single act, but let's discuss them in terms of Act 3. So appearance versus reality, obviously very significant in this particular act, because this is where Iago is really making the biggest strides in terms of carrying out his plan. He is going to appear like he is just nonchalantly asking Othello, why is Desdemona and Cassio sitting together? Or just casually noticing some things. And that links to the next one, which is friendship and loyalty. So he pretends to be Othello's friend, just saying, maybe you should be considering it. And as I said, if you read that scene, you'll notice how subtle he is, how his manipulation is so incredibly masterful. But in reality, he is putting his plan into action. Okay, love is threatened in this act, and this act serves as a sort of prerequisite or as a precursor to the threatening of love later on. Jealousy, we have the big quote about jealousy in this act, and jealousy is significant because this is how Othello is driven to abandon his rational self. He becomes extremely jealous, and he wants to ensure that Desdemona and Cassio are, they pay for their crimes due to his jealousy. Passion versus reason, once again linked to that jealousy. Othello he abandons reason, he gives into passion. He's going to, later on, he's just going to believe, weird and baseless grounds of supposed evidence that Iago brings as to the fact that Desdemona is cheating on him. So he gives into the passion, he abandons his reasonable outlook on life. Reputation and honor. This is very important because one of the reasons why Othello reacts so drastically to hearing that Desdemona is cheating on him is because of this theme of reputation. He believes that Desdemona is firstly damaging her own reputation and her own honor, and he cannot believe that she would do that. But furthermore, he sees it as she is challenging his reputation, his honor, and she's putting that on the line by cheating on him with Cassio. Racial prejudice is not a key theme in this particular act. Betrayal and trust links to that friendship idea. It's going to come a little bit later in more clarity. And fate versus free will. We discussed that key aspect of once Othello actually knows that, or has this seed in his head, has this idea in his brain that Desdemona is cheating, the ending is almost predetermined, but it's still going to take his actions to make it happen. I hope that has been helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for Act 4. Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be exploring Act 4 of William Shakespeare's Othello. Please be advised that there are 3 other videos that come before this in terms of Act 1, 2 and 3, and there's also a video about the overview of Othello, and I think that it would be helpful to watch those videos before unpacking this Act 4 summary. So Act 4 Scene 1. We've just left off Act 3, where Iago has manipulated Othello into believing that Desdemona is being unfaithful. And so Act 4, Scene 1, Othello becomes more and more affected by Desdemona's alleged affair, and he actually falls into a trance. And this causes, after he has manipulated and convinced Othello that Desdemona is cheating on him, Iago is now going to provide some proof for his theory. He knows he doesn't have to provide a lot of proof, and it doesn't really have to be substantial proof, but just a few elements of proof, or proof in inverted commas, are going to ensure that Othello believes him 100%. So he manipulates and masterminds this plan where he instructs Othello to hide while he speaks with Cassio. And he tells Othello he's going to be asking Cassio questions about Desdemona, but actually he's asking Cassio questions about Bianca. And Bianca is the prostitute that Cassio does not take seriously. She's the one who Cassio does not respect, and so he starts laughing about Bianca when Iago asks him these questions, and it shows that he really does not respect her. He mocks her. And Othello overhears this, and he misinterprets Cassio's words as being about Desdemona, and he deduces that Cassio is mistreating Desdemona, which makes him furious. So we have this sort of weird reaction of Othello, because he's deeply in love with Desdemona, even though he's deeply furious that she is supposedly cheating on him. And so he gets angry at Cassio for mistreating Desdemona, even though he is going to, in the next act, kill his wife, even though he apparently still loves her. Othello vows to kill Cassio and Desdemona, but he simultaneously recognizes Desdemona's gentleness and kindness. So he definitely is, set on killing Cassio, because Cassio is sleeping with his wife apparently, and also is mistreating Desdemona and talking badly about her, not respecting her. And he also wants to kill Desdemona, even though he recognizes that she's so gentle and she's so kind, and she shouldn't be mistreated. Iago makes a suggestion that Othello strangles Desdemona instead of killing her with poison. Lodovico arrives from Venice. So remember, if we go back to cast our minds back to Act 1, Scene 1, we started off in Venice there, and in Act 1, Scene 3, Othello is sent to Cyprus to deal with the attack of the Turks, which never actually happened. So they're still in Cyprus, and Lodovico arrives from Venice, and he has instructions from the Duke which says that Cassio is to be made the governor of Cyprus, and Othello is to return to Venice. And in this exchange, Desdemona is there, and Othello hits her. He strikes Desdemona. And this is a critical point in terms of the theme of violence, in terms of the theme of passion versus reason, but also in terms of the theme of reputation and honor, because Lodovico has just come from Venice. He hasn't seen Othello's rage sort of unfold. And he questions Othello's reputation, and he says it's nothing like the behavior he would have expected of Othello. He says that actually no one in Venice would believe that Othello would do such a thing to his wife because of his reputation being so stellar. If we move on to Act 4, Scene 2, Othello confronts Emilia, who is Desdemona's attendant, and he inquires about Desdemona's activities. And Emilia passionately confirms that Desdemona is absolutely innocent, that there's no reason to believe that she is being unfaithful in any way, shape, or form. Othello confronts Desdemona, and he demands her to confess all her sins. And Desdemona pleads her innocence, and she says that she has not done anything. But Othello does not listen. He is convinced that she is guilty. And this goes back to that point where we said this theme of fate or destiny, because now that Othello has this inkling that she might be cheating on him, he's going to take that as fact, and he's not going to believe anything. So sort of Desdemona's fate is predetermined. Fate is predetermined in that moment in Act 3. And we see here Emilia is going to say Desdemona is not being unfaithful. She's innocent. Desdemona is going to confess her innocence, but he will not listen. Iago and Emilia comfort Desdemona, who is deeply upset by Othello's accusations and temper. So Othello accuses her, he's very angry, and he storms off, and Emilia and Iago come and they comfort Desdemona. Iago, obviously this shows our appearance versus reality theme very clearly. And as they're talking, Emilia comes to a conclusion that someone must have manipulated Othello into believing this untrue narrative, which of course she has deduced this correctly. This is exactly what's happened. She just doesn't realize that it's Iago at this point, but soon she will. Then we have Rodrigo popping up again. Rodrigo confronts Iago, about how he has given Iago all his money, but Iago has failed thus far to secure Desdemona for him. So if we recall, Rodrigo paid Iago a lot of money, and in this scene, actually, it's somewhat comedic but somewhat sad, where he says, you know, I've sold all my land. He has literally given Iago all of his money because Iago has promised that he hates Othello very much and that he will help Rodrigo to get Desdemona for him, which obviously hasn't happened. And so Rodrigo says to Iago, hold on a second, I feel like I've been taken advantage of. I've given you all my money. I'm going home now. Like, you have betrayed me. You have not helped me in my quest. But Iago is such a master manipulator that he turns it all on Rodrigo, and he somehow convinces Rodrigo to assist him in killing Cassio. He makes up a whole story about how Cassio is standing in the way of him and Desdemona getting together, and so now he must help him in carrying out his plan to kill Cassio. And we obviously know that Iago has no intention of coupling Desdemona and Rodrigo together, but this is his ulterior motive. He needs to get revenge on Cassio. He needs to get revenge on Othello, and in order to do that, he is going to get Rodrigo to assist him in killing Cassio. If we move to Act 4, Scene 3, this is a scene between Emilia and Desdemona, and so the image on the very first slide of this video shows a production of that. Emilia and Desdemona talk about the types of women who cheat on their husbands. So this is almost a little callback to Act 2, where Iago, Emilia, and Desdemona are talking about women, and here Emilia and Desdemona are talking about, you know, have affairs and being unfaithful, and they're talking about the types of women who would cheat on their husbands. And we have a very sort of revealing moment, because Desdemona says that she would never have an affair, like at any point, for any reason, and that's almost this, you know, this crippling tragedy, is that Desdemona's been accused of this, and her personality is that she would never do such a thing. Whereas Emilia says that she might have an affair for certain reasons, and she brings different reasons as to why she might have an affair. And ultimately, Desdemona bids Emilia good night, and the next time Emilia will see Desdemona is on her dying, you know, as she is dying, on her bed after Othello has killed her. So if we talk about our themes, some key themes in Act 4, obviously appearance versus reality. Iago is fooling everyone. He's fooling Emilia, he's fooling Desdemona, he's fooling Othello, Lodovico. He is, you know, he has a narrative to tell to every single person, and he appears like he's on Othello's side when in reality he's not. Appearance versus reality, we can also look at Desdemona in this case. So in this instance, to Othello, she appears to be guilty of cheating on him, but in reality she is not. I mean, the proof in inverted commas points to the fact that she is, but she's really not. Friendship and loyalty linking to betrayal and trust, because we can see this with Iago and Rodrigo. Rodrigo believes that Iago is his friend, when in reality he's not. He's just using him, and he is ultimately going to betray him in Act 5, Scene 1. Love is also significant, because when Othello confronts Desdemona about her alleged affair, you know, he does not believe what she says. So I mean, I think a key aspect of love is trust, and so the fact that he doesn't believe her is, you know, really calls into question their love. So that's significant. Jealousy is obviously what drives everything. Passion versus reason, that's incredibly significant, because Othello, we see him acting more passionately in defense of his reputation and honor. And then the fate versus free will, that we can point it back to Act 3. You know, is this fate or is this free will? I think another theme we need to add in here is violence and aggression, which I suppose we could link with passion versus reason, but the fact that Othello physically strikes Desdemona is important to recognize, and that calls into question, you know, whether this actually is a loving relationship or not. I hope that has been helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for Act 5. Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be unpacking the final act of William Shakespeare's Othello. This act only has 2 scenes, but they are jam-packed with a lot of action. So in scene 1, Here we have Rodrigo trying to kill Cassio. So remember, if you think back to Act 4, Iago has manipulated and convinced Rodrigo to assist him, and he's convinced him that Cassio is a threat, and so he must try and kill him. Cassio wounds Rodrigo in self-defense. So Rodrigo tries to stab or kill Cassio. Cassio notices, and he stabs and wounds Rodrigo in self-defense. Even though Iago promised Rodrigo that he would assist him, he does not provide backup. So Iago is there in the background. He's seeing this happen. He told Rodrigo he was going to help him. Obviously, he's Iago, so he doesn't actually help. And Iago goes around the back and he secretly wounds Cassio. So Cassio believes that it is Rodrigo. Gratiano and Lodovico hear the disturbance and come to investigate. And Iago also emerges, and I've put here after hearing the disturbance in inverted commas because obviously he caused the disturbance, but he comes and pretends like he's never heard of this before. Iago then sees Cassio tells Iago, like, this man, I don't even know who he is, but he tried to kill me. And so Iago goes and he kills Rodrigo for his attack on Cassio. So really quite brutal here. He just murders Rodrigo, and Rodrigo finally realizes in his dying moments how manipulative and evil Iago really is. Iago continues to weave his web of lies, and he begins accusing Bianca of being involved in Cassio's stabbing. So we can just see the extent of Iago's manipulation here. It's not a really important plot point, the fact that he starts trying to convince Cassio that Bianca was a part of this in some way, but it really just continues to paint him as a real antagonist. Moving on to Act 2, this is where we have the real tragedy. So obviously we've started with those tragic consequences with Rodrigo dying, and now we're going to have lots more people die. Well, our two main characters and another character as well. So Othello commands Desdemona to pray for forgiveness, but he will not listen to anything that she says. And so that's really important for our themes, as we discussed, because he is not open to discussion about whether she's innocent or not. He says, pray for your forgiveness. You are going to die. Othello then kills Desdemona, and Emilia, who remember is Iago's wife and Desdemona's attendant, enters the room and hears Desdemona's last words, which she says, "A guiltless death I die." And that's a really important quote because it shows that she is not guilty in her death. She is, Othello has killed an innocent woman. Emilia says that Desdemona was an angel and that Othello is a devil. So Emilia is horrified. Remember that Othello actually came to Emilia earlier and asked him if Desdemona was truthful and, faithful to him, and Emilia said yes. And so she's really devastated by Desdemona's death. Othello reveals to Emilia that it was her husband Iago who told him of Desdemona's affair. So before this point, Emilia had been in the dark about that. Remember, she had stolen the handkerchief for Iago, but she didn't know what Iago was plotting. Remember, she did think that there was someone manipulating Othello, but she didn't know it was Iago, and now she finds out. Iago arrives and proclaims that he only told Othello what he thought, and then Othello interpreted it in the way he saw fit, which is fundamentally true. If you think back to, Act 3, Scene 1, where we spoke about Iago being extremely manipulative and very subtle in this manipulation. So he doesn't say to Othello outright, look, Desdemona's having an affair, or I would watch Cassio and Desdemona closely because they're having an affair. He just says, observe her well with Cassio. He just says, just my thinking, like it's just for my own thoughts, nothing else. So he's quite true in this regard, in the fact that he tells Othello what he thought, and Othello then took it upon himself to interpret it and to go all crazy and, choose passion over reason. I mean, obviously you can contend that and say that, Iago was intentionally manipulating Othello, which is true, so you can spin it the other way. But I would say, based on the evidence, this is quite a true thing, and Othello has taken it out of proportion. Which Iago knew he would, but Othello still was the one who took on what Iago said. Emilia tells the truth of Iago's plan and how she stole the handkerchief per his request. So she's trying to defend Desdemona here, trying to show Othello what an evil thing he's done, and she starts professing the truth. And Iago tells her to stop speaking. She doesn't. She continues to tell the truth, and Iago then kills Emilia. So that's very dramatic as well. He kills his own wife. The characters then finally recognize Iago's villainies. They finally recognize, after all this time, everyone's calling him honest Iago. Finally, they're like, okay, he's actually not so honest and truthful and good. Othello then tries to stab Iago, but Iago does not die. And while they're standing in this room, Othello calls for Cassio, and he asks Cassio for his forgiveness. Othello then asks to be remembered, which was the quote on the very first slide here. He asks to be remembered in a fond manner, in a favorable manner, because despite what he's done to Desdemona, the rest of his life has been honorable. And then he kills himself. And that is the end of Othello. So just like in any Shakespeare, we need to ask the question, well, not any Shakespeare, but a Shakespearean tragedy, which Othello is definitely a Shakespearean tragedy. We need to ask, is our main character, is our protagonist, is Othello a tragic hero? So a tragic hero is a protagonist who is very honorable, who has a good reputation, who is noble, and yet they have one fatal flaw. They have one form of hamartia, one fatal flaw that leads to their demise. So Othello definitely falls into this category because his one fatal flaw is his jealousy and his easy trust of people, which takes this honorable man and turns him into the shell of his former self, where he is killing his wife and doing terrible things and having terrible thoughts. So I would definitely argue that Othello is a tragic hero. And with a tragic hero, it's very important, if you get an essay about it, to talk about how Othello was before and contrast it with how he was after. So tell me how before he was noble and reputable, and use all those quotes to back it up, and examples in the sense that he was asked by the Duke to go and lead the army in Cyprus. That's a very honorable man. And then at the end, how he turns out to be incredibly violent and not wicked, but he goes very violent and aggressive, and he does not represent his honorable personality. He's lost his honor, and he's a desperate plea at the end to protect that honor again. So here are our themes again, the same themes that have cropped up in every single act. So appearance versus reality. Obviously here we have Iago. He appears to be this honest man, but in reality, now we finally figure out the rest of the characters finally see in reality he's a villain. Friendship and loyalty. I think we can see this in a positive way with Desdemona and Emilia. They really are loyal to each other. They really have this very strong connection and friendship, and Emilia dies trying to tell of Desdemona's innocence. But then you also have the counter to that, which is Iago and Othello, and also Iago and Rodrigo. I mean, Iago manipulates them both. Iago betrays them both. Love, that goes back to that question that I posed right at the beginning in Act 1 about the ways or the reasons that Desdemona and Othello give for loving each other. Is that really substantial? What does love really mean? Because clearly that love didn't last very long, and clearly it has its limits. Jealousy, obviously Othello's driven by jealousy in his action to kill Desdemona. Passion versus reason, we also spoke about this, in that Othello acts on passion rather than reason. He doesn't think it through, he doesn't think rationally, he just acts out of passion to kill Desdemona, to try and restore his reputation, which ultimately undermines it. Reputation and honor, there we spoke about that again. So here we've seen that Iago's reputation is false, that maybe we should call into question this whole idea of reputation. But we also see how important reputation is, that Othello's final words are, don't remember me as this, remember me as how I used to be. Remember me as this honorable person. And so we can see how important legacy and honor are. Racial prejudice, it's always present by the fact that they keep calling Othello the Moor, as though that is his entire identity. So that's always present throughout the play. Betrayal and trust, we discussed that when we spoke about friendship and loyalty. And then fate versus free will. So that's obviously significant as well. And I think definitely this shows us free will, because Othello is the one to, in inverted commas, pull the trigger. Obviously, he doesn't, there's no guns or anything, but he really does cause the death of Desdemona. He kills her. And so that to me shows a sense of free will. And the fact that he wants to preserve his legacy and he commits suicide, that's also a form of free will. He chose to enact those actions and to make those decisions. I hope that this has been helpful. Please subscribe and like the video.